Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz bassist, composer, and arranger John Lang of the Kolotov Mocktails. We caught up with him on October 16th about the new 2020 CD, Ivy Hall. It is an album produced during a week-long recording session in Nashville back in 2019. This is an American jazz quartet that met on tour for another artist, and from their inception, the band possessed a completely unique sound and pulsating groove. John explains this and so much more as the COVID-19 world continues into ambiguity. Enjoy.
I have a rainy day here in New York. We're settling into the fall, but pretty good otherwise. Not going anywhere lately.
Yeah, nothing. Everything's shut down.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking a minute to talk about the new project, the new album. And I guess before we really get in to Mocktails, I want to kind of ask, what's it like to release an album during a pandemic? How are you feeling about this?
Well, that's a great question. And it's kind of funny, everyone is just scratching their heads, I think. Like, everyone kind of pretends, press agents and, managers and booking people, they kind of pretend to know, like, oh, this is the way we'll solve this, but it's all uncharted territory. So we kind of had no choice. It took a while. We recorded it, and then, we did some overdubs back and forth because we were only together in Nashville for a week, and I knew I was going to do overdubs anyway, so I did them at my home studio, and then we did some stuff again, and so it took a little bit longer than anticipated, and thus we came out during the pandemic. But it's kind of cool in that people are sitting at home, or were, not so much now, but they were sitting at home, so they're looking for things to do. So there was kind of you get people's attention, and they were, able to sit and listen a little bit. But I think it's right now, since everyone seems to be coming out with a streaming concert and a record release right now, it's getting kind of crowded because it seems to be a lot of content coming out because musicians have been sitting out for 5 months, maybe recording and doing stuff. And so it's kind of difficult not to play live to support an album. I think that's what this band is best at, is playing in front of people. And so, it's a mixed bag where you do have an audience who's hungry for content, but you also have the inability to really play live. So I think it's a mixed bag, and none of us really know, if it's good or bad.
When the fans do actually pick up Ivy Hall, they're all original compositions, what do you want them to get from this project, this experience that you put out there?
I think it's an incredible mixture of kind of four musicians who we met quite by chance, kind of just by fate, and it's kind of a sound of four guys who really dig playing and improvising and writing. And there are lots of groups out there where you have one writer, or with other musicians, his music is featured. And this one's kind of an equal split between the four of us, and all four of our influences are kind of usually honored and executed really well. And it's rare for that to have kind of equal voices in a band like this. So it's mostly, I think this group is really fun when we have been played live in front of people, is that people who don't even necessarily enjoy jazz per se, in quotes, like this band a lot. It's fun for them to listen to. And it's also, there's something in there for jazz fans too. It's not, there's some depth to our music, and we certainly enjoy writing, and we really enjoy playing together, and I hope that comes across when people listen to us.
So let's talk about the beginnings of your jazz journey. Like, where were you born and raised, kind of how music became your life?
Sure. I was born and raised in a place called Fresno, California, which is in Central California. And I actually began kind of playing in high school, and I ended up going to a music school in Los Angeles, and then finishing a jazz degree in San Diego. And eventually I studied with a great bass player in Los Angeles named John Clayton, who I'm sure many of your listeners will recognize. He's a great jazz bassist and teacher and composer. And he sort of got me to center in on my real goals, like what did I really want to do, even if it sounded crazy. And I sort of loved, at that stage, I really loved the music of Mike Stern. And so he had me transcribe a lot of his music, albums and albums worth of his music and all the parts. And I eventually moved to New York and kind of went and befriended Mike at the 55 bar, and I showed him all my transcriptions, and he had me come over to his house and, play along with him and practice with him, and that was a really, really great jazz education itself. And then moving to New York, when I first moved to New York, I also was sort of more of a Latin bass player. I played a lot of salsa and Latin jazz, and when my first group in New York that I have a CD out for called La Onda Va Bien was like a Cal Jader Latin jazz band. I played that stuff for about 3 or 4 years. And then I got a job kind of going to Europe playing in a jazz trio, and I did that for about 6 months, and I came back to New York, and that band had sort of folded. So I just started freelancing around New York and more straight ahead stuff, and I delved a lot more into the straight ahead world then. And I've sort of been doing that ever since. I've sort of been getting deeper and deeper into the tradition, the bebop stuff and earlier music. And actually currently, because of the pandemic, I'm currently a master's student at SUNY Purchase in New York, which has an incredible jazz faculty. And I've been using the time that we all have to kind of learn more, and it's a pretty deep river. So, but anyway, that's kind of where I came from and how I ended up in New York.
So what was the first live jazz show you ever saw that made you think, man, this is something I want to do?
It's funny. I can honestly say maybe it wasn't a live jazz show. When I was in high school, a senior in high school, I was a foreign exchange student in France. And it was kind of difficult to jump into another culture, another language, especially go to school in another language. So I had a tough fall and winter, and sometime around my birthday, which is in March, I decided to ditch school. And I took myself, I went to lunch and dressed up, and I went to a movie, and I just chose any movie to, kind of escape school because it was kind of hard. And the movie I saw was around I had this really fun day. I went and ate this great lunch, and I was walked in a movie, didn't know what it was. And I was playing music at that time, but not, jazz per se. And I watched this movie, and it was just so incredible, just everything in it, the music and the personalities and everything. And I just sort of, just something switched over, I think, then. And then after that, I kind of had the bug. And, obviously, ever since I've been pursuing it in one fashion or another. But I remember a lot of, I've seen tons of jazz sets, and it's hard to put anything into words, but I will say, when I moved to New York, I befriended the bass player, David Happy Williams, who played in the Cedar Walton Quartet for many years. He used to get me in free to see a Christmas Cedars Quartet would always play for 2 weeks at Christmas. And I got into many of those shows. There were a few nights there when they played, something about swing music, when it's played a certain way, the sensation of rhythm and the execution of music is so light, it's like floating, and the band would sort of just levitate for an hour. And I've just never heard anything like it, and I've always sort of aspired to get to that level. Just this light dancing feeling, just like this effortless feeling, and that quartet could do it, and Billy Higgins could exude that from other musicians, and it was just pretty incredible.
I know everybody's missing live music right now, but what do you like the best about being a musician, a performer?
That's a good question, especially now. That's hard for me to answer, but I would say, since I was a little kid, my mother ran a ballet company, so I didn't start as a musician. I started as a ballet dancer. I used to get bawled out a lot because I'd be sitting, I'd be missing my cues because I'd be sitting in the speakers trying to listen to the music. And now I realize I was sort of transfixed by the basses in the orchestra. And so I think there's something about being in the middle of sound. And it's still, to this day, I think, like I'm about to go to a rehearsal with a bunch of really good musicians for an online concert. And I don't know, there's just something about being in the middle of a bunch of great sounds, these coordinated rhythmic sounds and the way the vibrations vibrate in your body. I think for me anyway, it's very visceral, even when I was a little kid. And I think I see it in my son. He does the same thing. He's always dancing and reacting physically to music.
Speaking of COVID and this absence of live music, when we do return and you get back on the stage and we all get back into the audience, what do you hope we realize about this absence of live music?
Oh, that's a great question. That's such a good question. I think many people who are still listening to jazz, I think we all realize that there's some deeply human element. And I was listening to John Faddis actually yesterday tell us there's, don't be angry on the bandstand. We're not about that. We bring people together. Like Louis Armstrong, could bring literally warring nations in Africa to a standstill so that he could play a concert and they would all listen. And I think it's important to realize that our music's supposed to bring people together. It's supposed to bring us a communal experience. And I truly believe that. I know that people who are into jazz and jazz musicians were sort of transfixed by music. I think, sometimes the public at large thinks they're not, but they're sort of just, not taking the time to even sit down and listen to 1 second and hoping that people sort of miss the real human, healing element in music, and especially live music. Nothing like hearing a bunch of music that can transfix you for an hour. It can really change your brain chemistry around. I know it does. It does for me.
So everything is going to come down to this. Everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your fans, bandmates, that you're living your life. Who do you think you are?
I'm a father of a 7-year-old and like a working musician, and I'm in graduate school, so I'm just very busy. I don't have a lot of time to philosophically think about who I am. And actually, so in some ways, I think that's good. I'm sure I have many thanks to many people. I hope, to the guys in this band, I hope I'm a good bandmate. And to anyone I play with, I hope I'm able to respond well and appropriately to what they're doing, and I hope I'm able to, bring stuff to the table that's always cool. And I hope that in life too. Like I think, at least at this time in this country, it seems like too many people are very concerned with themselves and what's good for them. And I sort of was raised by my parents to think about what was good for my community and the world at large, and I would hope that I would do that in all my actions and playing or whatever, real life, music, etc.
Right on. That's a great answer. John, thanks for taking some time out to Neon Jazz today. Good luck with the new album, and getting back on the stage too.
Thank you so much for your attention, and we really appreciate it, and we hope everybody enjoys the music.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Nashville, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to John for his time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.